If you are having sex with a man who is not your husband, you are taking on the spirit of a concubine. If you are only birthing children for a man and he has not wifed you, sis, you are taking on the spirit of a concubine. Hey girl, it's Johanna with God is Glamorous, where we learn how to live our best lives through Jesus Christ. And girl, I am back with another word because today I want to talk with my single women, my single girlies, because I believe that God gave me a word to talk about. And he really wanted me to talk about concubines. And during this Bible study, during this video, I want to talk about concubines versus wives and how God does not want us to be concubines or take on the spirit of a concubine, but he instead wants us to be wives, act like wives, think like wives, and expect to become wives. In 2025, we are not taking on that concubine spirit. There's going to be no concubine energy in 2025. Ladies, we are wives. We are not side chicks. We are not baby mamas. We are wives. So today I want to talk about what are concubines, how to not take on that concubine energy, that concubine spirit, and to walk into the spirit of a wife. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so first things first, before we get into concubines, it's important to talk about what exactly were concubines. So within the Bible, there were two different sets of women. There were wives and they were concubines. Wives were women who had special privileges, certain levels of protection that concubines did not. Wives were actually women who were married, while concubines, on the other hand, were secondary wives. They were not official wives. They were really only good for either sex or birthing children. They didn't have any special privileges or certain levels of protection. They were just only really good for sex and for having children. And today, for 2025, I believe that God is saying that he does not want us to take on that spirit of a concubine. And a lot of women right now, you may be walking in the spirit of a concubine if, number one, if you're having sex outside of marriage, it's giving concubine. It's not giving wife. Number two, if you're accepting less than you deserve from a man, it's giving concubine. It's not giving wife. God is telling us that he does not want us walking in the spirit of a concubine. We are to act like wives, think like wives, and expect to become wives. So let's talk about concubines, why we should not be walking in the spirit of a concubine. No concubine energy for 2025. And let's talk about it. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so first things first, what separates a concubine from an actual wife? So concubines were not good enough to be wives, and because of that, they were secondary wives. So within the Bible, concubines did not have a level of protection that wives actually had. So in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 15, David is actually fleeing from his son Absalom. His son Absalom starts this huge revolt, and David decides to flee with all of his household to get out of Jerusalem. So the Bible says that David takes all of his household and leaves, except he leaves 10 of his concubines to keep the house. What this tells us and shows us is that concubines did not have the same level of protection as wives had. So in 2 Samuel chapter 16, Absalom actually gets to David's house. The concubines are there keeping the house. David leaves his concubines knowing that they'd be in danger, but he didn't care. And what happens? David's son, Absalom, ends up raping the 10 concubines that David left behind. This goes to show that the concubines were second-class citizens. They were secondary wives. They did not get the same access and privileges that actual wives had. And in 2025, we are not going to be walking in that concubine spirit. We are wives. When there was danger, the king took the wives because they actually had some value. And you may be wondering, oh, he never takes me anywhere. Oh, he never takes me to meet his mom. Because you may be walking in the spirit of a concubine. Get rid of that concubine spirit. So in 2025, I need you to take an audit of the men that you are currently dealing with. Can your man protect you when there's danger coming around? If he can't, you may need to get rid of him, because in 2025, we are walking in the spirit of a wife and not a concubine. Sis, you are worthy of protection. if the man that you are dating cannot protect you, if there's danger that's coming and he does not think to make sure that you are safe or that you are good, he may not be the man that God has for you, because that's how you treat a concubine and not a wife. Number 2, concubines were used as pawns to hand over when there was danger. So in the book of Judges, chapter 19, this is literally one of those saddest and creepiest stories of the Bible. There was this Levite who was passing through a town trying to get back home. And as he was trying to get back home, he ends up staying with a man. And there's people within that city who saw that Levite and they wanted to rape the man. So the man in turn saves himself and hands over his concubine to be raped. In Judges chapter 19, verse 25, the Bible said that this man handed over his concubine to these men, and they used her and abused her and raped her all night until morning. And they raped her so much that she ended up dying. And the Bible says that this Levite man ended up taking her body, chopping it up into 12 pieces, and sending it out to the 12 tribes of Israel. What does this go and show? This tells us that concubines were only good enough to be handed off as pawns in the event of danger. Concubines were handed off to people as pawns. A man would never even think about handing over his wife as a pawn to be used and abused and raped. Wives had certain level of protection that concubines did not. Concubines were only good for sex. And sis, this is not the year where we are going to be playing the concubine. We are going to be walking in the spirit of a wife. And if you know that a man would easily hand you over to be used and abused by other men, he is not the man for you, sis. Again, take advantage of your inventory. If you are dealing with a man who would not protect your purity, who will hand you over to be used and abused, sis, get rid of it, because this is your season of being a wife and a bride, and we are not walking in that concubine energy. Again, take audit of your circle and ask yourself, if your man would not protect you, if he would hand you over as a pawn to be used and abused to save himself, says he ain't the one for you. And number 3, in the Bible, concubines were only good enough for 2 things. They were good enough to have sex with, and they were only good for birthing children. That was it. That was the only thing that they were good for: sex and having children. And sis, in the year of 2025, there's going to be no concubine energy. You are not only good for sex. You are not only good to birth children. You are a wife. You are a wife first. And God is telling us that he does not want us walking within the spirit of a concubine. He wants us to think, act, and behave like the brides and the wives that we are. So within the Bible talks about Solomon, how he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Those 700 wives, they had special privileges that these concubines did not. These concubines were only good enough for sex. So in Genesis chapter 30 with Rachel and Leah, when they were not able to have children, they handed over their servants to Jacob to be a concubine for him so that they can have children with him. These concubines were only good for 2 things: sex and birthing children. Does that sound familiar? A lot of men today are only using women for sex and birthing children. And in 2025, sis, we are not walking within that concubine spirit. We do not have that concubine energy. You are a wife. You are a bride first before anything else. So let me ask you, if you are having sex with a man who is not your husband, sis, you are walking in concubine energy. You are taking on the spirit of a concubine. If you are only birthing children for a man and he has not wifed you, sis, you are taking on the spirit of a concubine, and this is not what the Lord has for you. If you are dealing with a man who has not married you and he's only using you for sex and for having children, sis, you are walking in the spirit of a concubine, and this is not what the Lord has for you. In 2025, you are to take on the spirit of a bride and a wife, and you are to wait until marriage to have sex, because there's a man that God has for you, and he's not going to just use you for your body or what you can give him. He's going to see the spirit. He's going to look at your character and see you as a wife, and he's going to wife you. And then everything else can follow after that. So in 2025, no more concubine energy. We are not taking on the spirit of a concubine. This is this season to know and recognize that you are a wife, you are a bride, and know that he who finds a wife finds a good thing, and you are that good thing. So be patient, wait on God's special timing, and when the time is right, God is going to make it happen. So if this is you and you're like, I feel like I'm walking in the spirit of a concubine, I want to be a wife, I need to learn how to wait until marriage to have sex, girl, I got you. Click the link in my bio. I have a 12-week coaching program called The Glamour of Sexual Purity, where I teach women how to wait until marriage to have sex. So be sure to click that link below. But other than that, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Stay glamorous.